Maybe the info is just a bot. It's a Russian bot watching the proceedings. Welcome everyone to Sustainability Work Group for the Heights meeting number 6, I believe we're on. Or did we extend this? Is this now technically a 7th meeting, Becky? This is number 6. Okay. So we are where we thought we needed to be when we thought we needed to be there. So thank you all for your time, your dedication, your expertise, your insight. You guys have really helped educate us. As good as we think we are at this stuff, there's a whole world of other insights out there that you've helped bring to the table. So thank you all. As I was saying, I'm gonna share the consensus recommendations letter document to the screen here, and I've highlighted a few things that I'll bop through and report back to you all on. And there's, I think, a couple of questions I have as I was rolling through this the other day. So should we just jump into that, Becky? And I think this could probably get us till 3, but I don't think we'll probably need the full 90 minutes. I've been known to say that before as well. All right, let me share my screen here. I have been having some weird screen sharing things going on, but this looks like it's going to work. Oh, now I lost all of your faces. Can I move that over? No. Okay, is everybody seeing the screen?
Yep.
The shared screen, okay. Oh, now I got you all back over here. Okay. All right. The first section here was really a helpful affirmation from you all about what the port had already kind of put on the table. So we won't go through this point by point, but we started this project with our mission being to advance sustainable development with some pretty high goals, some pretty aggressive sustainability goals, and glad to see that many of those resonated with this group. We are, I can rattle them off here quick. We still have a goal and a plan, and are trying to finance a carbon-free neighborhood. We are almost to the end of our pre-certification Q&A back and forth with the U.S. Green Building Council. And we are still targeting platinum pre-certification. That just shows them that we have a plan to do all this stuff. And over the course of the next 10 years, when we move from Lead for Communities plan and design into ultimately 10 years from now, Lead for Communities existing, which would be data measurements and performance metrics to verify as a fully built out community of 112 acres, 1,000 jobs, 1,000 housing units, et cetera, in year 10, let's say, year 8, maybe if we're lucky, Lead for Communities true certification for an existing community would be the verification metric that we've actually done all this stuff. We talk about the glacial pace of economic development, and that is going to be evident here, unfortunately. We are requiring buildings be certified to LEED at least at the silver level, not just certified level. Energy efficiency, PV, these are all big parts of this. Eliminating natural gas lines. We have said we're not going to build out full natural gas infrastructure throughout the site. I know there was public testimony at City Council about no new fossil fuel infrastructure. You have heard me say on occasion, unless there is something from an economic development perspective, from an equity and economic inclusion and wealth creation perspective that leads us to say we need a natural gas line somewhere, but not to stub it to every property. And I can tell you, just in the marketplace, a very sustainable company who has that as part of their brand and mission also does have a piece of equipment. They've approached us in an unsolicited manner over the last several months. And we've talked about this, and they've said they don't make an electric powered piece of equipment. And I can't share with you what that piece of equipment is, or you'll immediately know exactly who I'm talking about. If there's not a practical or affordable alternative, that's where our economic development mission would sort of bring us to the table to figure out how to power whatever that piece of equipment is, assuming there are good paying, livable wage jobs that help us make that argument. We're still running at a district energy system. You've heard about the one we've proposed. There are other technologies that are being explored as well in real time here. We are about to start submitting our 30% plan set to the city for the rights of way for the roads and utilities. And those do include this district stormwater management approach. How much of it is in the street, how much of it is on private property. That's the haggling and the negotiating to go on between us and the city over the next few months here. Becky and I have been working on the EV charging requirements, percentages, type of equipment, definitions, etc. All that stuff is in process and getting baked into the covenants. We are going to go get the Mercury. We thought we were going to be able to start in October when the AUAR is completed, and we were not awarded cleanup grants in the May grant round. We just were notified here a few days ago. The state, Met Council, and Ramsey County felt like we weren't ready because when we applied on May 2nd, we had no. They want to see financing commitments from people who are going to build buildings. They want to see purchase agreements from people who are going to build buildings. We didn't even have an approved master plan. So we're going to have to go back in November and hopefully bid the cleanup in January, mobilize equipment in February, and then in the spring, we would have to really start running it at cleaning up contamination. But we do need those competitive grants to help do that. We did get a $500,000 cleanup grant from the EPA. And we do have EPA funds in-house. So we've got a good start, but we need the other units of government to help us out here. And we are about to start submitting stuff along the wetlands regulatory trail to get the wetlands cleaned up and mitigate any impacts we have there. So now these ones, starting with number 12, are really this august body's recommendations beyond what we had kind of already put on the table when we probably had meeting 1. Reducing embodied carbon. We do have a line of sight on a demonstration project. Thank you, Mr. Metza. Do you want to share with the group our success with the U.S. Forest Service grant? I think they may or may not have all heard about it. I certainly can. We partnered with the port, A1X Automation, John's company, and Sustainable Forestry Initiative partnered on a grant application to the U.S. Forest Service, and we were awarded a $249,000 grant to assist in building a mass timber facility out there. I don't know if it was a grant directly to you, John, or if it was through Sustainable Forestry Initiative.
It's through Sustainable SFI.
Okay.
Yeah, we figured out the allotments of what money goes where. None of it can be used to actually build the building. So, and we can talk about that some other time if you want.
Sure. Yeah. As part of that partnership, the Port Authority agreed it would incorporate mass timber as a preferred material, recommended material, et cetera, in our covenants. And again, Becky and I and others are working on that language right now. There are some lead points around embodied carbon. Everyone will be required for the first time on the site to do an embodied carbon analysis, a life cycle analysis of their building materials. And within lead, they can get extra points, given that they're all going to have to certify. They'll need points, but they can get extra points if they actually make selections that show they can have a measurable reduction in embodied carbon. I think is maybe the simplest way to explain it, right, Becky?
Yeah.
The 12C is one that honestly I struggle a little bit with. I think the idea of people building structures, roof, wall, foundation structures to allow for adding floors to a building, I think it's much more commonly done in an office building environment where you might be building a 2-story office building and you might think someday you might want to put a 3rd or 4th story on it. I think it's going to be hard, particularly with construction costs doing what they're doing, to expect the marketplace to build these light industrial buildings that are able to put that you're able out of the box to float a 2nd story on in the future. just to be completely transparent with you. Multimodal transportation. A lot of this is also baked into the master plan that was approved. Bike lanes, trail systems, sidewalks, all of that sort of stuff. The urban design work group spent a lot of time talking about traffic calming, bump outs, elevated intersections, those kinds of things. The electric car sharing thing, I think I've reported that we've had some initial discussions with Our Car. My old friend Shannon Crabtree is there, and she's talked about some interest they have in helping us develop a program specific for Hillcrest. So we are excited to advance those discussions. The workforce agreement stipulations around transit biking, that one was not coming as clearly to my mind as what the discussion was. Was it a discussion around providing transit benefits counted towards some kind of best faith efforts in a workforce agreement? It was to encourage transit? Is that where this conversation came from? I don't recall directly offhand. 13B here. I think it was Russ. Yeah. I can tell you through. What's that, Becky?
I know that we've talked in this group both about just the physical infrastructure for walking and biking, the limitations of what we'd be able to do with the public transit, the covenants not necessarily having as much of an impact on those areas. And then we did kind of have those conversations around the workforce agreements maybe being a vehicle for encouraging or incentivizing alternative or low carbon modes of transportation.
Through another cohort, we are working on these updated workforce agreements. We've talked about community benefits agreements. Those conversations are moving forward. We hope to bring that to our board this summer as well. And we're pushing pretty hard on the workforce side as well. And of the 15 or 20 strategies that cohort created, ranked, reviewed, discussed, and ultimately, came up with a top 15 or whatever, our consultant, Lisa Tabor at Culture Brokers, has advised us pick 5 or 6 of them that are the big ones the big rocks you want to push up the hill that you can do, you can track, you can measure, and hopefully do them well. And focus on less than half a dozen of these strategies this other workforce cohort came up with. And those 5 or 6 are things around wealth creation. There are things around diversifying workplaces. There are things around better healthcare benefits. There are things around their spend, and it is elsewhere in this plan. I'll note their local spend, if they can document they're spending their dollars with either local or BIPOC firms on the east side or in St. Paul, I should say. They can earn back a piece of their reward for doing things like that. So we're trying to be a little more tightly focused. I don't think that one will make it into the workforce agreement conversation, frankly. The minimizing the amount of space dedicated to parking. It's another kind of push-pull thing right now. The environment we're in, a lot of the businesses that locate out there are going to say, until these other transit systems and shared mobility systems are built out, a lot of these builders are going to say, hey, you want me to have 100 jobs in this building, I need a parking stall for every 100 of those employees. That said, as we build out these other systems, and let's say 10 years from now, they realize, oh, these other alternatives are in place, I don't need those 20 parking stalls. They could add on to their building, remove those parking stalls and build a building extension, which would likely from us be required to add jobs and add tax base. So there are ways to convert this parking to other uses. And we are at the direction of, at the request of Councilmember Yang and others, Urban Design Work Group, et cetera, trying to figure out ways to activate these paved spaces beyond just being empty parking lots. I like the snow melt system idea and high foot roller traffic areas. I think in the hub area where we're supposed to be activating that area right next to the park, I think having some cool sidewalk technology there would be a great idea. We'll have to talk to the engineer. I've never built a snow melt system under a sidewalk before, but I have put a heated floor in a bathroom. So I think it's kind of the same concept. But maybe on steroids. John, thanks for your commentary about rapid charging for electric semi-trucks. I did just hear Elon complain about having to push back the start date for the manufacture of his mega truck. I think it's now up to mid-2023 before that manufacturing line will get up and running. But the idea of these electric fleets, we have our other project we're working on with United Properties over in Minneapolis. We have had conversations with Bill Dressler at Environmental Initiative about fleet conversions. And so he's ready and has resources. When we have a real company in hand, we can pair them up and see how we can start trying to convert some of these fleets to electric vehicles of different sorts, depending on where the technology is at that time. Encouraging healthy landscapes. This first one I think is, well, there's a couple about trees here. Becky's colleague Tiffany at LHB had reached out and found a company down in Texas that can bring up from Texas a custom made spade on the back of an oversized truck. They'd have to truck it up here, and they could pick up and relocate the largest trees out there. They gave us quotes, and for $500,000, we can pick up and relocate 6 of the largest trees out there. Yeah. So that's not the end of the story. It just is a data point, one of many to come. We are, as we've looked at preparing these infrastructure plans for the city, just by hitting the city's boulevard tree requirement, we will start to get within a few hundred trees of replacing as many trees as are on site today. That's before the development pads even have to start doing their own tree planting. So I think we will have some good successes on trees. Appreciate the idea about consulting with indigenous communities. We have, now that we've gotten this new EPA cleanup grant, I mentioned earlier, that triggers a Section 106 review, National Historic Preservation Act. It's not about the historic buildings or the history of the golf course, but there could be cultural and archaeological resources on site. So we are just at the very beginning. EPA is going to send their federal undertaking letters, and that will trigger our consultants at Streamline and a group of archaeologists to begin reaching out to the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. All of the federally recognized tribes in Minnesota will be notified. Their tribal coordinators will be asked to consult with MnSHPO, the EPA, and the Port Authority on a variety of methods of determining if there are archaeological resources. So I think we've got a good path and a good process to help us with that engagement. And as well, the Open Spaces Work Group kicks off this fall in September, and we have committed to working with the Open Spaces Work Group to engage with indigenous communities and figure out ways we can honor the history, the pre-development history of this site through the Open Spaces Network, the trail system, the wetlands programming, et cetera. So I think we've got some good wins ahead of us there as well. We talked about planting trees. Tiffany is all over me on the canopy thing. So I feel like we're in a good place there. Literally writing into the covenants as we speak, only 10% can be of this genus and 20% of that genus. And so we've got the landscape architects giving us the right language to talk to our buyers' landscape architects to make sure we don't have some bug show up 15 years from now and wipe out half the trees on the site because they're all the same species. So I think we'll be good on biodiversity and resilient tree cover. District approach to local energy generation. Yes, yes, and yes. We have in draft form written into the covenants that RECs need to stay on site. That community solar is continuing to be explored. I'm meeting with Excel, frankly, next Tuesday to kind of check in where we're at, run through some of this covenant stuff with them, and see where they're at in terms of helping us get where we need to be. But it's been a productive discussion. It's been a friendly discussion where they're not, I think I've told you before, they're not going to turn over the regulatory and legislative world for us, but they are going to bring a host of strategies and technologies to the table that I think will be impressive. I have yet to see it, but I'm trying to remain optimistic and confident. Water. We did get some pushback to the ATIS system at City Council. I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but one of the council members is concerned about contaminating the aquifers, which of course, as are we, right? I mean, personally, professionally, I wouldn't do something that had a risk of contaminating the aquifers. And I think it's partly a misunderstanding of how the system we've talked about with Evergreen would work. There would be one aquifer loop that is only aquifer water, no non-corrosives, no glycol, nothing. Merely is what the Department of Health is looking at permitting for, not specifically for our system, but generally for these ATIS systems, is systems that are aquifer only water in one loop up into a heat exchanger. And then the loop that runs through the district energy distribution system, which does need to have anti-corrosives and glycol or whatever in it. That's the one running at the surface, under the roads and into the buildings, et cetera. That's a completely separate loop system. So the aquifer water never interacts with any other type of water. The Department of Health has a series of about 12 things you have to prove to them before they will give you a permit to do something like this. And I believe the Department of Health is also very interested in not contaminating the aquifers. So some of you may have seen last week, EPA announced some new standards, exposure standards for PFAS, basically saying there is no longer any measurable level of PFAS that is safe to have in drinking water. The article in USA Today I was reading last week said there's like 2,000 water systems around the US and millions of people that probably have some level of PFAS in their water that is a health risk. So we're certainly attuned to it and do not want to do anything. But our message to the folks that were having concern at council was that's not how the system is designed. Evergreen provided us information. Department of Health has information and a pathway for permitting. And at the end of the day, the master plan moved forward with I think probably technically it was an amendment that the city and the port would work with the Department of Health to try and get the city on board. I can't remember what they call it, a deferment agreement. Somehow get the city into the loop on the permitting process, kind of giving them an approval of it. I don't want, we need the state and the experts and the hydrologists and hydrogeologists at the Department of Health looking at this thing and being the ones doing the science. If the city is involved in that process, that's great. But I mean, ultimately, if the state says no, they're not going to let the city say yes, and probably vice versa. So there was some concern, and I just wanted to put that out there. We've talked about stormwater. That stuff, like I said, is getting designed into the infrastructure plan right now. We don't, unfortunately, have a huge bed of sand to infiltrate all this back in and recharge the aquifer. We just don't have those kinds of opportunities given the geology on the site. But we do have a district system with best management practices sort of interwoven, some underground storage, some above ground treatment, and the wetlands will be part of this as well. Permeable pavements, we've tested them, we've tried them. The permeable paving blocks that we used for the first time in an industrial loading dock at the Midway building, 2016, they haven't busted up. They're still there. They're still doing their job. So I think we proved something. And we're happy with our design review process to lead our buyers down that path on permeable pavements. Resiliency, interesting, our conversation about a resilience hub, the housing work group, which has started meeting, they met last night, and through that conversation about affordable housing, somehow we wound up at Resilience Hub. So it really is interesting to see the work of these work groups really build on each other. It was talk about a community space. Well, what would it be for meetings, for this, for that? One of the women was involved in distributing food during the pandemic and providing, critical supplies to families in need. And could we do something like that? And I'm trying to connect the dots. Like, yeah, that sounds a lot like this resilience hub we've talked about in the sustainability work group. So it's really interesting to see these ideas build on each other. Oh, there's Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us. We are just going through the letter of consensus recommendations, and I'm reporting back on what great success or what great challenges we might have with any number of these. 17, resiliency measures. District approach to infrastructure. Virtual power plant, FERC order 2222. We are still in contact with the Department of Energy. They're keeping an eye on this. They are interested in funding some component of it. They are the ones that taught me about FERC 2222 when we were having some difficult regulatory negotiations. And so where we've kind of landed with Excel is we probably don't know today what the ultimate energy generation systems and distribution are going to be across this site over the next 10 years. There's so much movement in so many areas. And so we could see potentially multiple technologies being demonstrated here. We're familiar with the Darcy geothermal system. A guy at my church, my buddy Jimmy, invented that at the U of M. I think he's now left Darcy, actually. I heard the other day. But so some advanced geothermal, the ATES system, Excel's net zero natural gas plan calls for geothermal district energy systems. So I think at the end of the day, we will wind up with something cool. Does it qualify as a VPP? That I don't know. But it is certainly one of the approaches and technologies that's kind of leading the thought leaders right now. Future-proofing. This one is specifically about EV logistics. More broadly, I've been thinking and talking a lot about future-proofing with the real estate community as a way to not get stuck with brown discounts for ungreen buildings and stranded assets that they can't sell in 8 or 10 or 12 years to the capital markets because task force on climate-related financial disclosures and ESG targets and carbon regulations. And so future-proofing is really embedded in everything we're doing out here. John, I think it was you that was helping us think about that through the lens of EV logistics. So thank you. Pursue affordable and ultra-affordable housing options. Absolutely. We're in, like I said, housing work group meeting number 2 was last night. We've got a great group of 10 folks that are helping us through that conversation. We assumed we would have, kind of every bookend within the spectrum of people interested in housing show up. We wound up with, frankly, probably less proportion of NIMBYers than I anticipated. It's a group of folks that live in the area. They all live very near the area. One of them literally on the property line with the golf, a couple of them literally on the property line with the golf course. But all of them understand the need for affordable housing, it appears, and are helping us talk through some of these options. Last night, our special guests were Tara Beard, the new housing director at PED. She came out of Met Council doing housing policy, and Gretchen Nichols from LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation. LISC funded me when I worked in the neighborhood a million years ago, and they do a lot of work funding putting together creative financing packages for affordable housing. So that definitely is happening. Green job industries, you know, we try not to narrow our funnel, because as soon as we say it must be this, something else shows up that we weren't anticipating, because we're government and we apparently aren't as good as we think we are. But like I said, you know, we've got John's company. John and I's first conversation was about building a net zero building somewhere in St. Paul. And there are at least two of these other unsolicited interested parties we've been talking to whose sustainability is, are they green manufacturers? Yes, actually one of them would definitely be considered a green manufacturer. So I think given the marketing, the branding, and the communication about the site, I think we are inherently going to attract companies that have a green motto, if you will. I think it's going to be baked into their DNA, because to do what we're asking people to do out here, I think it's going to have to be baked into their DNA. I was at a different real estate event the other day. Some of you guys may have run into a guy named Stephen Todd, the energy guy is his brand. Stephen Todd, the energy guy. He's been around for a while, doing energy efficiency consulting, and one of the early sort of energy efficiency finance folks. He's helped us promote PACE quite a bit. He was there, someone called him out. I saw him standing there, and during the break, I grabbed him and said, you know, we're getting ready to go to market, Stephen, and I'm a little nervous. Like, you know, we're working with this sustainability work group. We're working on Lead for Communities Platinum. We've got some really aggressive goals out there. And, you know, I think we just got to get out in the marketplace and see who's in and see who's not. And then figure out if I need to find a new job. But his response was very warming. He said, you know, Monty, I've figured out over the years, I can't get someone who is apathetic about this stuff there. You know, when I meet with a business owner, if they're sitting there with their arms crossed and they are just exuding nothing but apathy towards energy efficiency and renewables and building a sustainable, I'm not going to get them there. He said, but more often than not, I have people come to me who say they know this is the right thing to do. Convince me I know it's the right thing to do. You tell me why it's the right thing to do, so I can justify it up and down my decision tree, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, maybe it's the bell curve, it's the early adopter thing. We don't need to get 100% of them. We don't need to get 100% of the marketplace, but we probably need to get 25% of it. So sorry for that sidebar.
I would like to say one thing really quick.
Yeah.
If you take what's happened with EVs, what you're going to see, and I'll predict this, is a lot of crossed arms and all that kind of stuff, but there's going to be an avalanche once it starts to happen. You know, Tesla's Model Y sold out 2 years in advance. It's almost impossible to get an EV right now. And in part, very small part of it is parts issues. The rest is people, you know, people sit on the fence till the last minute, and then it's going to be an avalanche. And the same thing's going to happen in this community. Everybody I talk to really wants to be involved in this. They need to see it happen. They need to see it work. And then you won't be able to build these communities fast enough, I guarantee you.
Thank you, John. That's very encouraging as we chop some new wood here, as it were, literally and figuratively. Local, I screwed my windows up now. Local contractors, yes, yes, and yes. The Paris Dunning, the staff person for the East Side Area Business Association, was just in our offices 2 days ago, talking to my colleague Tanya. Asaba is going to help us connect with local vendors that can provide services to what is going to be $250 million, $250 million of private investment on this site. So there will be opportunities for local contractors. We have enough time to get people educated about what's coming. We are talking to a couple of different entities that help train contractors and vendors as to how to bid and earn this work, win this work in a competitive bidding environment. So yes, we have an active vendor supplier diversity initiative, both internal at the Port Authority and specifically to Hillcrest. Infrastructure lighting, frankly, one of the last things on my checklist, as I think Becky knows, for our Lead for Communities pre-certification is to get something in writing on an email, scratched on a chicken scratch on a pad somewhere, sort of documenting the idea that Xcel Energy would provide energy efficient streetlights to this neighborhood. The lights the city uses they don't meet the energy efficiency or these dark skies requirements of Lead for Communities. And we believe Xcel's lights do, and they own and operate streetlights in most other cities in their service territory. Xcel does not, St. Paul runs its own. And the director of public works has agreed that we could work with someone else to provide energy efficient lights out here. But we need to document that for the folks at US Green Building Council. That's on me. Emphasize the use of exposed wood. As I said, Becky and I were working on this just today. A couple hours ago, we were writing another little subsection of the covenants about mass timber. It does get into the embodied carbon analysis and help us down that path. So I'm excited, really excited to see something happen with mass timber out here. Daylighting in buildings, it's always one of the strategies that go into the energy efficiency bundles when we do whole building energy simulation for these buildings. Daylighting is one of the calculations that goes into that model. And making the heights repeatable and educational. We have talked with the urban design group, now the housing group, you guys, about programming of these spaces, making them attractive to invite and welcome in businesses, residents, employers, employees, guests, etc. And I think that open spaces work group will be where we'll figure out the interpretive, the SHPO actually, it's interesting. We have had engagement around indigenous land recognition, acknowledgement statements, and programming and interpretation across the site. That also is where that open spaces work group will focus on. SHPO came back in an early letter saying, while it doesn't make the site eligible as a historic district, they do believe that the history of the site for 100 years for the Jewish community is also something that needs to be acknowledged and explored as we go through our consultation with SHPO. State Historic Preservation Office, sorry. Too many government acronyms. So yes, educational, repeatable. If you haven't been to the hub at Beacon Bluff and seen our 27 interpretive panels about the history of 3M and its federally eligible historic district, the stormwater demonstration area, there's some cool stuff out there. So I think that speaks to our ability and commitment to doing this right. East 7th and Arcade on East 7th in between Vomella and Eastside Family Clinic. It's public, open to the public. There's a permanent public easement that goes all the way up the sidewalk, all the way down the front of Historic Building 21. So feel free to go out there and walk around and enjoy it. It is also open to be used for events. When they were doing East 7th block party, they would shut down the street, and we wound up putting electrical. It is the first net zero energy plaza in we think at least the country. There are ground-mounted solar panels out there that offset all of the electricity use for irrigation and for site lighting. So we can do something cool out here. This chunk of the recommendation letter was about recommendations for things that sort of fell outside of the purview of the Port Authority, or maybe outside of really what the Port Authority could control. And again, that housing work group is focused on affordable housing. We understand there's poor transit at the site, and as the site gets built and there's demand, we will work with Met Transit to fix that. If Russ were here, he would give us the update on composting, but last time he mentioned it, it sounded like there is a plan to roll out organic composting in St. Paul. I don't remember exactly what it is offhand. And broader mobility infrastructure. We, in the AUAR, we were asked to expand our traffic analysis. So I don't know if it's gone exactly to these boundaries, but it has expanded from its original version. And I don't know about a 4-to-3 conversion of White Bear, if that's planned. I'm a fan of them. I thought doing one on East 7th Street right in front of Beacon Bluff because, you know, I didn't know what I was talking about. And I thought, you know, these trucks we need to get these trucks to the freeway. You know, don't you dare take a lane. Well, the traffic engineers eventually convinced me 3 lanes with a dedicated middle turn lane, you actually get better throughput because you don't have people stacked up in the left lane. And then when they're stacked up in the left lane, you don't have people cutting out into the right lane to try and get out of the stack. And when they finally did this, you guys may remember I lived in Northeast Minneapolis for many years. And when they did this to Broadway, the road that connects Stinson Boulevard to 280, they did a 4-to-3 conversion, and you know, UPS is on Broadway Street there. FedEx is on Broadway Street there. A couple of big office buildings right there. If it works for logistics companies, I think it'll work for White Bear Avenue. But again, a little outside of our purview at the Heights.
It is, I know. But I also, if you look at Lindale, they did it to Lindale, and there was a huge fight against it, and Lindale's now prospered since then, and property values have gone through the roof since. So yeah.
Questions or concerns about any of that? I can't now. I'm so confused. I can't tell where to look. I feel like I'm not looking at you guys, but just maybe because I don't know how to use 2 screens anymore. There we go. Okay. Anything specific folks want to talk about? We've talked about most of those strategies quite a bit. We've documented them. I hope you feel like we took your input in earnest and are really pushing as hard as we can and incorporating many of your suggestions, strategies, recommendations right into the covenants, as Becky can attest to.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic document. Every document's about compromise, but this has got a lot of leading edge stuff in it. I think it's, like I said before, I think it's gonna be an incredible community, an example to everybody in the country on what can be done, especially at 45 degrees north latitude in one of the coldest states. Oh my God. And I do have one question about the removal of the soil. That one really scared me, being delayed, of course. But is there any way that can be done over the summer so we end up at the same building point, or is that just a no way? Starting in
that's what we're gunning for. The starting demolition and remediation was going to be August initially, then became October due to the AUAR approval. We can't get a permit until the AUAR is approved. So says the Environmental Quality Board. I get it. but really getting demolition and grading started, it's not the critical path. It's the mass grading that's the critical path. And that wouldn't have started until the spring anyway. And so we think we're making up time that otherwise could have been lost by bidding in January, mobilizing equipment in February, so we don't lose a month in the spring when road restrictions for heavy equipment kick in. So as soon as the ground is thawed, we'll be able to go. And our goal, John, is still to deliver sites to the marketplace by fall of 23. And we're going to start marketing to the broader commercial real estate marketplace in the next couple of weeks here. So we've got to hit those targets.
And what does that marketing program look like?
Well, initially, we kick off with what in the real estate world we'd call like a site announcement or a broker announcement or a site introduction, but a 2-page, what we'd call a 1-pager, a 2-sided PDF that is, some of the high-level requirements, so we don't waste a lot of time talking to people who are apathetic about all this stuff. Some of the workforce requirements, some of the housing priorities, a lot of the sustainability priorities, some of the attributes of the site, the master plan will be on there, and really it's the call us. It's really just the initial introduction across the entire commercial real estate marketplace to say, call us. Very typical, very low, low intentionality. Let's put it that way. And so we have met recently here with MIDA, the Minority Economic Development Association. Actually, Andrea, one of our execs at the port, she's on their board. She introduced us to some of their staff who work on their loan programs and their vendor supplier diversity programs. They work primarily with companies who, on the financing side, need to build, minority-owned firms who need to build $5 million to $15 million projects, which is kind of what we need here. And they have a pipeline of folks that we've never really historically connected with, that they can bring to the table as pipeline projects to help us diversify who winds up owning land here. So MIDA is going to be a great partner in this. We will do intentional outreach to the minority chambers of commerce, and really start reaching out into communities. If we just do that first part I mentioned, if we just send out the 1-pager site introduction to the MNCAR, the Commercial Association of Realtors, all our brokerage, licensed brokers like myself, if we just send it out to them, we're going to get what we've got for the last 30 or 40 years. Almost ubiquitously white-owned companies. And we're trying to do something different here. So that's it. There will be, and the phone's going to ring off the hook, frankly. There's not a lot of land in the urban core. We're going to have to say no to a lot of people. They're going to get upset, some of them, and they're going to try and find a way around doing some of this stuff. And we've, I've spent my career at the port having to tell companies, no, you don't have enough jobs. You're not willing to do the right thing. That helps us accomplish our mission. We explain to them what our mission is and how is your project going to help us manifest our mission. And it's about jobs, tax base, and sustainable development and equity. So Chelsea, you had a question?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. The first one is, how can we continue to stay involved? And are there more points coming up where it would be helpful for us to stay involved and advocate for what we talked about in this document? That's the first question.
We can make sure that you guys, if you're not already on our sort of targeted email list and social media list for everything that goes out broadly for the Heights, we certainly can make sure you guys all get added to that. I would love to, I'm trying to think of what they call it at my church. There's like an action alert group that is like, when we need to activate for some kind of equity action, there's an action team or something. So we certainly could explore something like that. Because the bonding bill got stuck, we didn't get $12 million to build the roads and utilities. So we have a gap we are now scrambling to fill. We've got some ideas, some good ideas, some crazy ideas. We will figure it out, but there'll be a number of financial opportunities for folks like yourselves to weigh in with your perspective. There is another public comment period coming up for the AUAR, the Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review, which is it's the little brother, little sister to an EIS, Environmental Impact Statement. In Minnesota, you can accomplish that kind of analysis through an AUAR, Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review. And really what it does, it tries to set the bookends of environmental impacts. How many square feet are you adding? How many people are you adding? How many cars are you adding? How are you impacting natural systems and man-made systems? And it sets the bookends for how you would impact those systems based on the intensity of the development. So it's not like the master plan process where you're trying to pick a plan. You're trying to establish how whatever you do, how if you did the least amount of development you ever might do on the site or the most amount of development you might do on the site, what is the impacts of those bookends on natural and man-made infrastructure largely? And that public comment period, we will send you information on the AUAR public comment period. I do know some of the same folks that came out against us trying to stop the master plan have already written some letters in regards to that AUAR. So it would be nice to have some countervailing balance. So I'd be happy to connect this group with that process. And we hope there is an opportunity, whether it's about affordable housing TIF on the site, whether it's about some of the other ideas we have for financing this gap. I think there's an opportunity for folks to weigh in with our partners at the city or the county or the state to help them understand how important some of these tools are.
I know that was something in the master plan that the master plan made clear was that there additional funding is needed to build out the sustainability goals for the Heights. Is that still up in the air, especially since the infrastructure thing didn't happen?
The infrastructure thing not happening honestly makes it harder because now there's a little bit of a risk of pushing for net zero funding. Well, if you're pushing for net zero funding, you must have money to build roads. So we don't need to give you money to build roads, right? That's the conundrum we're trying to avoid. And we deftly avoided it throughout the legislative session. And it was just the horse trading at the last minute. We were still in there. We might have been down to 2 instead of 12 reportedly at the last minute. And then the whole thing vaporized. So that wasn't anything any of us could have fixed, unfortunately. But I was thinking about this the other day, and the super energy efficient buildings, right? So the covenant we're working on reads like these buildings have to be 50% better than energy code is one way to tell a design team to build a super energy efficient building without getting into EUIs and various SB 2030 targets and this and that. So we're just trying to find the right words to communicate this. But in my mind, those building owners building super energy efficient buildings, that's private financing, right? We don't need to, it would be great if I could write down the cost of that. And frankly, we are talking to McKnight Foundation. They are interested in helping us fund what I've been calling that energy efficiency gap. So as far as we can push a building owner to take on debt through PACE, there's going to be something left on top of that they're not going to be willing to take on that much debt for. And I think we've got a lead on some energy efficiency financing. The solar, the renewables, that's all private financing. That's all debt. That's all business owners understanding a 10-year cash flow of a solar system, just like Vomela did, who are not environmentalists necessarily. They didn't do it to save the planet necessarily. They did it to offset their operating costs and realized it was a good financial deal. So part of that's on us to be good salespeople and good educators, and not necessarily needing a big check, a big check to hand away. The district energy, if we pull off a district energy system here, there will be approvals needed. There will be credit enhancements needed from likely the city, or at least city approval for the Port Authority to do credit enhancements, to issue debt, to issue bonds. There will be a lot of help needed. And again, it's this reallocation of capital, because that debt really is what's called revenue bonds to build a district energy system. The revenue bonds are paid off by users, businesses and residents, paying their electricity bills and their heating bills. But instead of paying them to Xcel, they pay them to the district utility, like out at Energy Park. Xcel is still selling us electricity to power all of it, which of course, hopefully we're offsetting with solar. So it really is just kind of blowing up the system and putting the pieces back together in a different way. So I hope that helps. We're not there yet. The finance plan is not complete yet. I was telling Becky earlier today, you know, I don't know that there will come a point in time a year from now where we can say we did it. We're done. It's net zero. We won't actually know that until we get to year 8 or year 10 and we're fully built out, and we can monitor, we can see what we're producing for renewables. We can vet it against how much we're conserving and using in energy. And so I don't think we can declare victory on net zero until we've actually built it and done it and can prove it. For the next 10 years, we're going to be telling people we had a goal, we had a plan, we figured out how to finance it, we're implementing the plan. And we've built 3 buildings, and here's how they're performing. And so that means we're right on track. And now we've built 5 or 6 buildings, and oh crap, we're off the mark by 20% of where we should be. So we got to adjust what we do for the next 3 or 4 buildings. I think it's going to be a bit more dynamic. I have had stuck in my head that we were going to figure this all out on day 1, write this plan, throw a bunch of money at it, and like we were going to be done, right? Like, cool. It's going to just happen. It's going to take some intentional massaging for the next decade.
I can see though how some of the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure up front will make a big difference for the build out for the next 8 to 10 years, like the district energy system. And the big. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a big one. That's a big decision to make or not make.
Right. Yeah,
but it sounds like that's not really a question. Like there's going to be some sort of district heating and cooling in place.
We would love for there to be. We are designing the right of way, so there's space in the right of way for the pipes. Whether or not we can put the pipes in the ground today, that is a question. I do know in a previous business center, 25 years ago, we laid conduit, we laid raceways to put in fiber optic when fiber optic was just being laid into these kinds of industrial centers. So that way the infrastructure was already there, you know, kind of the EV ready idea. Have we put the stuff in the ground when it needed to go in the ground? And, you know, we've really got until what I was telling the McKnight folks, who are also interested in maybe helping finance, so possible grant money to help offset the cost of these super energy efficient buildings, and potential loans or debt to help finance a district energy system. And what we were talking about the other day was the fact we really need to have that nailed down by early next summer, because that stuff would have to go out to bid to be started constructing late next year. And so, you know, we got to know how we're going to, if we're going to build it, we got to have the financing in place before we bid the contract. So we've got a little bit of time, but it's ticking.
Is there any possibility of doing a some sort of bonding for the geothermal portion of the district?
Yes, that's how we've done. That's how we did Energy Park. We issued revenue bonds, meaning that they are bonds that are offset by the revenue of the project. The only issue is when you do that and there's no revenue, there's no one paying utility bills for 2 or 3 or 4 years because the thing isn't built yet. And then you spend the money and build it, and then the buildings have to get built and people have to start paying energy bills. So there's this initial startup period of 2 to 4 years that is kind of risky. And you have to have credit enhancement guarantees. You know, Department of Energy, one of the tools Department of Energy brings to the table is a 75% loan guarantee, which would help get everyone involved more comfortable with that risk on the front end. So we still need to refine the approach. Our proposal, we still need to refine that working with Evergreen. Do you have to build out all of it at once? Or can't we build out a pod here, connect the next pod, connect the that was the attractiveness of the system, is you could build it out in a modular fashion. And all we've talked about thus far, because we were trying to get all the money to do it all at once, was asking and looking and talking about doing it all at once. And now we're starting to have to break it down into some smaller phases.
And one other thing, if XL does the lighting, because current infrastructure now is public domain, if XL does the lighting, I would assume they would own that infrastructure then.
Yes, yeah, they would own the lights. They like owning hard assets as a regulated utility.
Yes, yes, they do.
Okay, go. Anybody else have something? Because I have something.
What do you got, John?
How are you defining net zero? And the reason I ask is it for the complete property, everything on the property, or just for the buildings, or what? Because if some light industrial person comes in and puts in a couple of huge ovens, or if I have a Tesla semi truck on order, the charger for that is 1 megawatts, just the charger. Okay. So it's easy to blow this thing up unless we put some brackets around it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I think that's a key thing.
Becky, you want to take it? This is one of the first things we did almost 3 years ago, John, is define net zero as it relates to Hillcrest at the time. I think Becky was really key in that exercise. Becky, you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I'll tell you where we started, and then maybe Monty will add in some caveats related to economic growth and everything. But we are defining net zero carbon or carbon-free community as sequestering as much or having carbon neutral in terms of all of the activities that are associated with this 112 acres when it's operational, and we kind of see 2030 once it's fully built out. So we're seeing 2030 as maybe the year for that. And so all of the energy from buildings would be either renewable, or the carbon from anything that's not renewable would be offset. And transportation as well. We did look at it in terms of all of the transportation associated with the site, not just within the 112 acres, but as the Tesla drives out, you know, half of that trip would also be accounted towards the site. And then we also importantly defined it as on an annual basis. You can look like on a kind of real time, closer to real time basis as well, but we're looking at annually sequestering as much carbon as is being used. So in my mind, the ovens are included, and the Tesla, half of that trip to wherever it's going, is included. But Monty can jump in at that point.
So I think we've talked about it publicly, and within Lead for Communities, the greenhouse gas credit is calculated scope 1 and scope 2 emissions for buildings, transportation, and infrastructure. So we are looking at the energy efficiency and the energy requirements of wastewater pumps, for example. So infrastructure counts, travel counts, and buildings count. Buildings being the biggest chunk we have to deal with. And the caveat I've used, John, is, we're doing speculative land development. I can do everything in the world to try and make this a net zero community. But at the end of the day, if a manufacturer, who we love manufacturing jobs at the Port Authority, we believe they are living wage jobs, generally with low barriers to entry and career pathways and pathways out of poverty, frankly. And so if we could get another Baldinger Bakery, which is an incredibly energy efficient operation, but still uses a ton of energy, but also employs 200, I can't remember what the last count was, let's say 200 workers. I can't sacrifice the impact on economic development, the racial wealth gap, wealth generation, et cetera. I can't ignore that and say no, because we're still also trying to save the planet. I got to try and do both, right? And so what we've said is, for excluding industrial process loads, we modeled, I think, Becky, I was asking David Williams about this the other day. We modeled kind of a nominal manufacturing light production load in these buildings. We did not model a Baldinger Bakery with huge ovens and freezers and that kind of thing. And if the story of the Heights is, but for a handful or two or three or however many, but for these 2 or 3 companies that have very high process loads, this is a net zero community for buildings, infrastructure, and travel. I'll explain that with an asterisk, and we'll still show the world a new model for how to do development. So I think your Tesla charger might get an asterisk and or a free pass, whatever we want to call it, John. But that's also a reason to put a huge old solar canopy array over your parking lot and on your roof, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Especially the parking lot. I mean, it has a lot of benefits for the cars too. UV rays destroy cars, right? I might as well use them for something. Now, one other thing, how is the amount of electricity sent to the district heating aquifer heating system going to be determined? Is it going to be, is it one roof load, a certain percentage of that? Because of course, currently I get checks for half the year from Xcel Energy for my solar, the excess solar I generate. So how is it going to work? Have you figured that out?
No. I don't think so. At this point, we have proof of concept, right? We have proof of concept that if we did it in the way we have drawn it, we know it would get us quite a bit further towards net zero. We know it offsets those costs of that tough bucket of money to find to build super energy efficient buildings. It takes that off of the private sector and brings that into a public utility cost, a shared, more efficient cost. And so we've modeled some of those proof points to show that the concept works. I'm still struggling, frankly, legally with, is that equipment Becky and I were talking about this 2 hours ago. Is that equipment sitting in an outlot that the Port Authority owns that's next to that building? Is it in an easement? How do we connect it to that meter to artificially raise, not artificially raise, but to legitimately raise their load, that building's load, so we bump that 120% cap upwards? The mechanics of that, the legalities of that, the logistics of that, the engineering of that, we have not figured out yet. I got to get enough people pushing the concept down the road such that we can spend the boatload of cash it's going to cost to figure out how to answer all those questions with the attorneys and the engineers and the regulators.
Well, if that group comes up and wants to work on stuff, I'll volunteer to be on the group and help with any way I can. And I think anybody else who's got going forward, I just want to make sure that this keeps rolling, and all these, they're all just considerations. They're all worked out. they can all be worked out. It's just a matter of getting them.
You know, I had always thought of this and all of these work groups as having these kind of early on planning phase processes that lead to some direction to the Port Authority. And then I'm really hoping that this group, you know, on a ad hoc basis could continue to be pulled together to help answer these questions as we bump into them. And I would really appreciate if folks are willing to, you know, if we send out a meeting request and you're like, nope, that's all the time I had, that's all the brain power I had, you guys are on your own, no harm, no foul, just let us know, say, I'm out, I'll cheer for you from the sidelines. But I would love to consider this group a kitchen cabinet of advisors that we could keep coming back to. Cool. I see a lot of smiles and I see no middle fingers, so. I even see a thumbs up from Matt. Matt, Mike, anything you guys want to add? I know we're about at time here, and I just want to make sure everybody's had a chance to tell us what they're thinking, or if you think we done good here these last 6 meetings and got where we thought we should be.
Not much to add other than I'm excited for all of this, and like Chelsea, excited to keep it going.
Cool.
Yeah, I've been telling a lot of people about this and getting a lot of questions on it. So I think people are really excited about it, even outside of St. Paul. So,
well, we must be doing something right, because we were just invited to present at the Net Zero conference in Los Angeles in September, and at the Minnesota AIA conference in like November or something. So we're continuing to get statewide and national requests to tell people what we're up to, and hopefully that also helps generate some, you know, political, financial, legislative momentum to make these things easier to do, because frankly this has been fairly difficult to get this far.
Yeah. Remember what Mark Twain said? He said, it's amazing what you can get done if you don't care who gets credit for it.
I think you mentioned that before, John. Thank you for that.
Yeah. May have to put this whole idea in some key politicians announce it while he's in the audience, you know, surprising even him that he created the whole thing. You know, to that end, I should say, when we presented, I did a kind of fireside chat keynote thing with a gal from St. Louis at USGBC Live about a month ago, and Mayor Carter gave us the intro, and he knew about it. He knew what we were up to. He knew about the things we were proposing and talking about, and I think when the time comes, I think he can be a champion for us. It's going to take more than one, you know, men, women from every corner of our community to help make this happen. So
I was actually
appreciate all your guys.
Mayor Carter a couple days ago about this. We were chatting back and forth.
Good. Well, it's good that it's on those folks' radar screen, because then when the staff and the hired guns show up, you know, our opinions tend to have much less sway than voting constituents' opinions, frankly. Well, thank you guys. If there's nothing else, I think I'll be happy to give you 7 minutes of your Friday afternoon and the sweltering heat back, and have a great weekend. We will get a final signed letter out. I also said I'd get you plugged into the AUAR stuff. And Chelsea, you had asked me to share the ATES article. So I can, you know what, I'll send that and a couple, in that kind of last minute, oh my gosh, what's going to go on with this master plan approval thing? There was some additional research that Evergreen shared with us, like about the Department of Public Health permitting and stuff, permitting process and stuff. So I'll forward you guys some of that stuff. So if you start to hear those kinds of questions, you've got some information, and feel free to reach out. If I haven't given Mike, if you don't have an electronic signature set up, literally, if you sign a piece of paper, take a photo of it and email it to us, we can chop it down and turn it into what we need. Oh, I was going to say, I don't know if I have, but I'm happy to give you guys my cell phone number. That's always the best way to get a hold of me. And if you text me, if you need something, text me to my cell phone number. I will get back to you. If you leave me a voicemail on my work line at the office, I don't know if I even know how to check that thing anymore. So 651-338-1039. 651-338-1039. And I'd be happy to take a call or a text from any of you guys anytime. Chelsea knows, she got a hold of me and I sat in a parking lot. We talked for 45 minutes one day. It was a wonderful conversation. So I'm happy to offer my time for anything you got, guys. All right.
Thank you. This has been great.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all. And thank you, Becky, and the staff at LHB. You guys are the brains that have powered this whole endeavor. So I am actually running out to meet part of your other engineering team and your president for a beer at Udipol's right now.
Well, it's been great to get this group's feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your leadership,
Monty. I'm trying. Just keep the boat going in the right direction.
That's right.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.